So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the major Japanese watch brands. Now, if you compare it to the Swiss, there really aren't that many Japanese brands out there. There's pretty much just four main ones, and then there's a few extra ones, but we're not going to be talking about that today. We're going to talk about the four main ones, and the first one I'm going to talk about is Casio. So Casio, I think everyone knows them. They're known for other things like their calculators, and so Casio is really known for their digital quartz watches. And the best example I can think of is the F91W. This is their vintage style watches. So they do have their vintage brand. And yeah, they're quite affordable, usually less than $100. The one that they're really known for though is the G-Shocks. So the Casio G-Shocks, those ones are more utility or tool watches. They're very sturdy. Also quartz. Not all of them are digital quartz though. Some of them are analog quartz, but very, very popular. And in fact, some people don't realize that they own a Casio watch. In their head, they'll just think, I own a G-Shock, not a Casio. But G-Shock is a sub-brand of Casio. And then finally, this is a brand or a sub-brand that not many people know about because it's mostly in Japan, and it's the Oceanus lineup. So the Oceanus lineup, as you can probably guess from the name, it's usually ocean-inspired watches. And I don't know if I call them diver watches necessarily, but I guess they technically are. And they typically have a blue theme to them. And unfortunately, most of them are Japan exclusive, so they're a little bit hard to get here in North America. But those three are what you should think about when you think of Casio. So in general, it's digital quartz or analog quartz. And yeah, they're pretty good at it. And they offer these watches at relatively affordable prices. The next one I'm going to talk about, this is my favorite brand. We're going to talk about Seiko. So Seiko, in my opinion, is better than Casio. They have a huge lineup of watches. I think they're best known for their mechanicals. So they're best known for their mechanical watches, especially their automatic watches with the rotor. And there's a bunch of different types of Seiko watches, but we're going to focus on three again. The first one is Presage. And this is pretty recent. I think Presage was released definitely within the last 10 years. This is like their dress watch lineup. And honestly, I think they've hit the ballpark with this. All their designs are so unique with their textured dials. So Presage is a great way if you're looking for a dress watch. The other one, which it's kind of hard to show one specific example, but Prospex is another lineup of Seiko. And these are their sports watches. So that does include diver watches, and they have a bunch of different types of diver watches. Also their field watches or their mountaineer watches, like the Seiko Alpinist. So Prospex is more sporty, whereas Presage is more classy. And then they're high end, and technically it's a separate brand now, but the name shares with Seiko. So Grand Seiko is like the higher end. This Grand Seiko is higher in the hierarchy compared to the Oceanus series, because Grand Seiko can go up to the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So Grand Seiko has the best watchmaking, in my opinion, in Japan. So if you're looking for a really high-end Japanese watch, Grand Seiko is kind of like the Rolex of Japan, in my opinion. Next up, we're going to talk about Citizen. So Citizen is best known for their solar-powered watches. So solar quartz, and you're going to hear the word EcoDrive. So EcoDrive is their proprietary quartz, solar quartz movement. So they're best known for that. Now, Citizen's probably my least favorite out of the Japanese watch brands, and that's because there really is no direction or focus, or it's hard to describe, but there's really no iconic lineup that Citizen has. They do have something called the ProMaster lineup, and the ProMaster lineup is kind of like their sports watches. I don't even know if you can call it sports watches. In my opinion, the ProMaster watches are quite cluttered. They're really busy. They're usually pretty big, and no one really, at least from my experience, no one really likes collecting the ProMaster watches. And then they just have just random EcoDrive quartz watches. They don't really belong to a definitive lineup, or at least they don't belong to an iconic lineup at all, but they are very popular in malls. At least here in Canada, there's so many Citizen watches for sale, And I don't know, I find them kind of boring, but they're probably, out of all the Japanese watch brands, at least in Canada, Citizen is the most accessible. But they do have a special sub-brand. To me, this is like their Grand Seiko, or this is their Oceanus. It's called the Citizen or the Citizen. So this is high accuracy quartz watches. So think of it as taking their typical $200, $300 watches and putting it on steroids. These things are super accurate, much better finishing, and much better materials. But similar to the Oceanus, it is mostly available in Japan only. And you can sometimes find it in North America and Europe, but it's mostly a Japan exclusive. So Citizen is great for solar quartz, but otherwise, I don't know, I don't find their watches that interesting. Finally, I'm going to talk about a brand that some of you may not know, and this last one here is Orient. So Orient watches, and they are also known for their mechanical watches, but not as much as Seiko. So they're kind of like, they play second fiddle or second flute or whatever you want to call it. They're kind of overshadowed by Seiko in my opinion. That doesn't mean that their watches are bad, but they're just not as well known. And the two ones I can think of is they have the Bambino lineup. So their Bambino lineup is kind of like the Seiko Presage lineup. So these watches are more dressy and affordable. They're actually, the Bambino lineup is more affordable compared to the Presage lineup. The Presage lineup is around 500 Canadian dollars or more, whereas the Bambino is probably around $200 or more Canadian. So it's a little bit more affordable. And then they have other watches that I don't really pay attention to. They have like the Orient Symphony, I think, Orient TriStar. They have a bunch of random stuff, but they do have Orient Star. So Orient Star is their high-end watches. They actually start at a quite affordable price. I think the cheapest Orient Star is like 700 Canadian dollars. But again, you're getting the best of Orient. And they have things like, they have divers. Of course, Orient by itself has divers as well, but Orient Star has their best divers. They have dress watches. They have moon phases. So they kind of have a little of everything. So Orient Star, not as well known, but they definitely have a respectable lineup. So just to summarize, these are the 4 main Japanese watch brands. So if you're ever looking for a Japanese watch, I would look for these brands. So on the left, we have Casio. They are best known for the digital quartz watches. So things like the vintage lineup, their G-Shock lineup, and if you want to go fancy, they have the Oceanus lineup. Then we have Seiko, and Seiko is best known for their mechanical watches. So if you're looking for a Seiko watch, you can look out for the Presage lineup for dress watches, Prospects for the sporty look, and then Grand Seiko is their higher end watches, which they're starting to break into the Western market. So you're going to see Grand Seiko a lot more often. Then you have Citizen. So Citizen's best known for their Eco Drive, which is their solar quartz watches. In terms of their iconic lineups, there's really nothing I can think of except for maybe the ProMaster, but I think that's an acquired taste. Like some people will love the ProMaster, but others will hate it, including me. And if you want to go really high end with Citizen, you'll probably have to look at their Japanese domestic models, such as the Citizen, which I have, my Citizen Chronomaster. And then finally, we have Orient watches, which I would say is 4th place. So they're not as well known, but they also have mechanical watches like Seiko. They're actually owned by Seiko, so maybe that's why they're kind of similar to Seiko, just one step lower. And their most iconic lineup is the Bambino lineup. This lineup has been reviewed on YouTube like countless times, and they have a few other different lineups as well. And if you want to go fancy with Orient, then you should look towards the Orient Star. I myself have actually looked into their lineup, and I've almost pulled the trigger a few times, but my only issue is that repairing an Orient Star, I don't know if I have to go to Japan for that, but they definitely have interesting watches as well. So if you are interested in Japanese watches, definitely check out these brands and let me know which one's your favorite. But otherwise, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And as always, I will see you guys next time.